A quick reaction on the fact that you haven't got the bail.
Well, it's a huge disappointment in the higher court in Gujarat, and also a huge sense of personal insecurity, both for me, my husband and the family. But I think apart from personal insecurity, it's also a huge letdown for the survivors of 2002 who have banked on us, individually, personally, me, and also the organization Citizens for Justice and Peace. That has been the only organization that has withstood 12 years of a rigorous struggle for justice. So I'm hoping that the Supreme Court hears us out. Because let's remember, this was anticipatory bail. It's on, legally speaking, minor charges that have been alleged by the crime branch, and it has been through a very vicious propaganda route where all sorts of malified allegations have been made against us of financial misdemeanors without any substantive documentary evidence.
So what is your strategy ahead now?
Well, immediately we will look at the judgment closely and examine the grounds and go and appeal to the Supreme Court.
What do you think will be the future of Zakia Jaffery case after this?
You see, our stand has always been that it is our relentless support of Mrs. Jaffery and her wonderful, brave family that has taken the case of criminal culpability of powerful perpetrators to the ultimate degree, and trying to get political figures, policemen, administrators charge-sheeted for their role in masterminding 2002. Not just one incident, but masterminding what happened all over Gujarat. It has always been our stand that it is because of that case and that case alone that this kind of singular targeting began after 2010 to scare us off, to freeze our funds, to make sure that the support is withdrawn. I still have to retain some faith in the judiciary. The case lies in the High Court, and at some point it will be argued. If our personal liberty is at stake, it will be more difficult, but we are hoping that friends and supporters and our amazing legal team will step forward.
Any second thoughts about fighting these cases, about going against Mr. Modi, who's now the Prime Minister of the country?
It's a tough one. I mean, the day you're refused bail and the day your personal liberty is actually at stake, you tend to think differently. But there are times when I feel, of course, that I won't ever regret it. But what I think it's more beyond the individual reaction that I feel today or yesterday or tomorrow, I think what people need to understand, and even human rights activists and lawyers and writers and journalists who are all part of our fraternity, not the opposite side, need to understand that it's much more difficult when you take on people legally. And I think that's where we need to build up a far firmer, more solid and vibrant solidarity network. It's easier if you do a fact-finding report, if you write articles, make a film, all very important things. I'm not trying to undermine any of those. But if you decide, which is what I decided on those dark days of 2002, that we had done all the advocacy in 92-93 Bombay. We fought for the Shri Krishna Commission report like no other group did. But we didn't take up cases. So when I saw what happened with my own eyes in 2002, I said, this time let's see if there can ever be justice done. And that decision meant CJP was set up, and these most amazing board of trustees who are actually all Mumbaikars, except Cedric Prakash, who's from Gujrat, came forward to set up this trust, and entirely till 2007 raised funds locally. The Concerned Citizens Tribunal. But the resolve was mine to say that let's test the legal system and see whether ever justice can be done in communal crimes. The result was that we got 117 people convicted for life imprisonment. We got the Supreme Court to monitor the cases right up to today. We got a huge report from the National Human Rights Commission, which enabled us to do all of this. We set up the Concerned Citizens Tribunal, headed by Justice Krishna Iyer, Justice Sawant and Justice Suresh. But all of this also comes at a huge cost. But when it comes to going to court, ensuring that you stand just behind the survivor. In all our cases, as a matter of principle, CJP is the second petitioner. It will always be Zakia Jaffery or Zaira Habibullah Sheikh or any of the survivor victims who will be the first, because it's their tragedy and their pain. But when you do that, you're filing affidavits, you're taking a stand, you're actually taking the system, holding the system to account in a way in which maybe just mere advocacy doesn't. And I think the real reason why we've been targeted, me personally and our organization, and my family, is because we actually stood by this struggle for 12 years.
But today we're talking about the cases of embezzlement and perjury against you. How do you defend yourself?
Well, we've taken a position right from day one when this FIR was filed in January 2014 of utmost transparency and accountability. So when the crime branch, after filing the FIR, which was first filed on charges of embezzlement of funds ostensibly raised for the Gulberg Museum, which by the way Citizens for Justice and Peace never raised, it was only Sabrang Trust. So the question arises as to why the crime branch illegally decided to seize the bank accounts, not just of Sabrang Trust, but also of Citizens for Justice and Peace, and also Javed and my personal accounts. I mean, this is completely unprecedented and illegal, but that's a minor issue. It's a major issue, but I'll deal with that separately. They start with that, and then they claim that as they went into some of the accounts, we don't know how they got these bank papers, by the way, because banking account papers are not easy to come by. And our claim has been that these account papers were illegally actually seized by the banks on a defamation suit filed by a former employee of our organization 2.5 years earlier. So the entire process has been illegal. The entire manner in which getting hold of our bank statements, credit card statements, etc. has been wrong. And after having all these documents, the crime branch has set out to mislead the courts. So now they're saying that though our original FIR was about the museum, now we're talking about credit card payments made to Javed and Teesta from trust accounts. Transaction by transaction, we have proven in the courts that any personal expenditure, whether it is for wine or jewelry or holidays, has been from our personal accounts. And all trust expenditure, whether it is lawyers' travel, lawyers' retainerships, legal basis, has been from the trust funds. Our auditors, who are well-known auditors, Hari Bhakti and others, have also done a re-verification of after the allegations were made, because we believe in complete transparency, and assured the crime branch that nothing was wrong. And yet the crime branch has persisted not just in simply saying things in court, but believe me, the actual attempt has been to malign us in the public domain.
How do you substantiate that? Because that's a very serious accusation against the crime branch.
By actually filing cases as and when the time is right, once our personal freedom is guaranteed. But for instance, even before even before the affidavits of the IOK and Patel were filed in courts, you had the BJP's Member of Parliament's newspaper in Delhi, Pioneer, publishing stories with my photograph on the editorial page. The nexus could not be clearer. Even before allegations were made in court, you would have the likes of Meenakshi Lekhi and Jit Finlani making all sorts of absolutely malified statements on television.
And who was their witness? If I may interrupt, why did you not file a defamation case against?
We have. We have filed a defamation case in the Bombay High Court against Rais Khan, and it is now going to, it's reaching its conclusion stage, and we are very confident of a victory. And once bail is granted, if it is, we will also file criminal defamations against all the people I've mentioned. But because it was a question of personal liberty, we wanted to wait till we sorted out the anticipatory bail before we launch one more defamation against all these powerful personalities. But I will repeat that whether it is in the Gujarat High Court, whether it is in the Bombay High Court, or whether it is in the Supreme Court, the nexus is very clear. So I'm saying it was way back in 2004 when, after the transfer of the Best Bakery case to Maharashtra, which itself was a landmark decision made while the NDA one was in power by the Supreme Court. And I think that's when the enemies of CJP, which is the powerful in the Gujarat state, decided to train their guns on us, because they saw us as the ones helping out that Zaira Sheikh family. And then as the trial began in Bombay, in the Mazgaon court, and as it progressed, the star witness was made to turn hostile. Now, ironically, at that time, I kept pointing out that the Gujarat state should have been the person interested, the party interested in prosecuting the guilty, but they never were. So it took a group like CJP to back the survivors and do it. We began the retrial in Mumbai, with the other witnesses who had not been examined in the Baroda court. And we found suddenly that on 3rd of November 2004, Zaira Sheikh is whisked away to Baroda, and she makes these scandalous statements at a press conference saying Teesta has kidnapped me, made me file false affidavits, and she's given commando protection by the Gujarat state. Amit Shah is MOS home at the time. Amit Shah sort of keeps her and her brother at Silver Oak Guest House. This is all part of the record in the Best Bakery case, because the whole drama unfolded in the Mazgaon court, and finally the Mazgaon court held us not guilty of tutoring. And not only that, when Zaira made these allegations, because the Supreme Court was monitoring the case, I, Teesta Setalvad, went to the Supreme Court and asked the Supreme Court to initiate an inquiry into whether Zaira was telling the truth or I was. and a 1-year inquiry was lodged by the Registrar General, B.M. Gupta, and unfortunately found that she had managed to get 18 lakh rupees from an unauthorized account, and that there was no question of tutoring by us. She was given 1 year simple imprisonment, but the man who was alleged to have given this money, a sitting MLA of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Madhu Srivastava, till today has gone scot-free. So even when you achieve justice, it's limited justice. At the end of the day, Zaira was still a survivor who had been turned hostile, but the man responsible for turning her hostile escaped the arm of the law. So right from the beginning, because we sort of not just did what we did in terms of documenting and covering the Gujrat genocidal carnage, but actually going a step further, which is actually stepping in to give very, very intrepid legal aid to the survivors right until now. Even though our bank accounts have been frozen, CJP has not stopped its legal aid, and our survivors stand by us. So 2004 was the first major attack. It took till 2005 when the Registrar General cleared us of any vicious. And I still remember, by the way, you're talking about nexus and where is the proof. But when the matter was being argued in the Supreme Court, the same Meenakshi Lekhi of the BJP, who's got the foul-mouthed presence on television today, her father-in-law, P.N. Lekhi, used obnoxious arguments before the Supreme Court, saying that Begum Teesta married to a Muslim, and how is that relevant? You know, so it shows the depth of their sickness, the level to which they will fall to try and prejudice the courts against you. I still remember it was December 10th, 2004, and I never thought I'd feel personally so humiliated as the way P.N. Lekhi made those arguments. Now it is Jethmalani making a similar kind of argument. The BJP, which has gone hammer and tongue on the Kashmiri Pandit issue and the 1984 issue, I always ask them that why did you not have the grit of some NGOs that you supported to help the cases of Kashmiri Pandits or 1984 victims? The BJP and the RSS is not interested in justice or reparation. They are the perpetrators of mass communal crimes. This is the first time in the history of independent India that an independent group of citizens has stood by survivors and managed to get some amount of accountability for culpability. That is the difference between 2002 and 92-93 Bombay or 1984 Delhi.
Why do you think in the perception of general public, CJP is not such a hero? Where have you gone wrong or where has the system gone wrong? The media has gone wrong in terms of projecting the truth.
See, it's all a question of who you see as the public and who you see as the larger public. I feel a sense of reinforcement and re-faith building every single day. I'm not looking at the hate mongering on Twitter, I'm not looking at the electronic media, I'm looking actually at large mass organizations on the ground. And I'm not talking about just Muslim organizations, I'm talking about people working at the grassroots, whether it is in Chennai, whether it is in Kozhikode, whether it is in Trivandrum, or whether it is in the northeast, or whether it is in Faizabad, Ayodhya, Jaunpur. There's a tremendous assertion of faith in what we have done. I mean, about the media, it's very interesting. Up to 2007, we were pretty much part of the hero story. But just as APCO Worldwide was brought in to do a makeover of Modi, then 2002 also became one of those areas in which you had to kind of blur the story, change the story, twist the story, etc. So while the media has not ever gone out and been all out vicious with us, they've certainly tried to mute us out. But honestly speaking, whether it is the Hindi media, whether it is the Urdu media, Marathi media, and a whole host of other ways that you are remembered, I don't think CJP's role is at all misunderstood or not a hero as you put it. I think we are very much a hero for the right kind of people in India today.
So what is the way ahead to beat communalism and riots? How does one deal?
See, there are two levels to it. One is, of course, how do you take care of communal prejudice in society, which is a different cup of tea, because that's got to do with social interaction, movements against ghettoization, encouragement of interdining, celebration of festivals together, looking at what our textbooks teach about different communities, etc., which is as important. But in terms of the rule of law issue, I think it's got to do with police reform. We need to have police reform so the police are allowed to function independently and are held to account when they don't function according to the law, number one. Number two, we need to have independent directorates of prosecution. Like what happened in Gujrat. In Gujrat, you had RSS and VHP men being appointed as prosecutors for the state, when the state is answerable to the Constitution of India. So you have to have an independent directorate of prosecution where the prosecutors are accountable to the courts. Then you need to have a whole series of jurisprudence, and which is why we had been moving for an prevention of communal and targeted violence law in this country. And then of course we had been moving for legal legislative changes, which is actually the enactment of a prevention of communal and targeted violence, justice and reparations law. And we led a movement against this, many of us, from 2004 onwards. And that was the UPA one's promise, which it failed to keep. And the strongest opponents of that were the Hindutva right wing, the strongest opponents for that. And the reason they gave for it is because we had defined minority there as religious and linguistic minorities. And in their skewed worldview, they saw that as meaning Muslims, Christians, and Parsis or whatever. Whereas we clearly said in that draft legislation that we had prepared together that minority has to be taken down to the district level. So, for instance, if you're looking at Malappuram or if you're looking at Kashmir, then the minority will be Hindu or Sikh. So, but you need a law to evolve. You need a society to first of all accept the huge crimes committed by us in the name of majoritarianism. And we've not done that. I think our greatest failure is that we have not accepted that the majority has been responsible for huge crimes against our minorities.
Well, how do you look at the communalism in the minority community?
I think it's one of those issues. I mean, you have to understand communalism of the minority. You have to look at the entire history of this country, 150 years, 200 years, between 1857 and the struggle for independence and partition. That both communalisms have to be targeted as firmly, have to be rejected as firmly, because they feed into each other. They are two sides of the same coin. And if the Muslim League and Jinnah have to be blamed for partition, then the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and the Hindu Mahasabha have to accept their share of the blame, because they feed into each other. So by pandering to minority communalism, not condemning the lack of dissent within the minority, not condemning the respect for women sometimes within the minority communities, I think we commit a huge mistake. We must condemn minority communalism in the same breath that we condemn majority communalism, which is why in the year 2000, 2001, Communalism Combat, along with Mahanagar, though we did not agree with Taslima's writings, jointly hosted her in this city. So it was not easy, because you had an NDA government in power in Delhi, though you had a Democratic Front government in Maharashtra. And we decided to invite Taslima, not because we necessarily agreed with her writing, but because there was a silly Muslim group, minority communal group, that had threatened to burn her alive. And we held this meeting in Dadar with full CCTV coverage, etc. State gave her security, and she came. And it was more to make a point that, we need to have enough democratic spirit and space within us to even listen to things we feel extremely upset about. I mean, there are many, many things I don't like heard about the way people speak about a lot of issues, including myself, but I don't threaten to kill them or burn them. You have to think about arguing yourself way out of something. So I think minority communalism is something that needs to be addressed squarely. We need to understand our history, that majority and minority communalism jointly was responsible for the partition of this country and for defining notions of nationhood which were not composite, which were religion based. So it poses a threat, and it poses a threat to genuine secularization of our society.
Well, the critique of what you said right now would be that the majority the right-wing critique of this would be that that India, in spite of everything, ended up being a secular state, whereas the other state chose to be a religious state. How would you respond to that?
I've just compiled and edited a book on the assassination of Gandhi, and it brings out the role of the Hindutva right wing in the murder. Basically, I have said there that from the killing of Gandhi right until now, there is a war that the Hindutva right wing has waged on the secular democratic state. And today, after the government in power in Delhi, the state is under severe threat. So while it is true that India chose a pragmatic and sagacious path of giving ourselves the constitution and remaining a democratic republic despite and in spite of partition, that was no thanks to the Hindutva brigade. That was because we had a national movement and a whole array of ideologies from far left to center who believed that this country can only stay together if we have a vision of equality and non-discrimination as our foundation and composite nationhood as our foundation. And that even Gandhi articulated, Maulana Azad articulated, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan articulated, Subhash Chandra Bose articulated, and that has never been articulated by either the Hindutva right wing or the Muslim right wing.
On that note, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.